What's up, boys and girls? Everyone, welcome to Ask-A-Vaper. Excuse me if I'm coughing a little bit. I got a little bit of the schmutz. But good news is I got a good show for us tonight. We're streaming live on YouTube. I got a little light going on so you can see what I'm talking about, what I'm trying to show you, and all that good stuff. So we're trying to step it up a little bit. We got a whole bunch of stuff in store for you. We're relaunching our YouTube page. So please make sure you like, follow, click the little bell, all that good stuff. So you can keep up to date with all of our reviews that we're going to be doing. We're doing some juice profiles on here. My goal is to have a new upload at least every Saturday. So that way those of you that work during the week can check it out then. If you work on Saturday, you can just check it out Saturday night or Sunday after you're done partying with all your shenanigans. But that being said, as usual, we've got our top of the show advocacy update. I just got an email today, matter of fact, from the VTA, which is the Vapor Technology Association, and they are joining forces. We're calling it a united front, I believe is what they're calling it. They've joined up with the AVA, which is the American Vapor Association. Our good friend Mr. Connolly's with them. Shout out to you. CASA, the Consumer Alternative Smoke-Free or Smokeless Association, and SAFATA, which is another industry organization, are all joining forces as what they're calling a united front. And their goal is to get the predicate date changed. Now, some of you that haven't tuned in a while may be unfamiliar with this, but the predicate date deal, that's where we're trying to get the grandfather date changed from what it currently is in, I believe, 2006 to the deeming date, if you will, which is August 8th of last year. And what that will accomplish is anything that was on the market up until that August 8th date will be able kind of grandfathered in, if you will, and they won't have to go backwards through the pre-market tobacco application process. And that's a huge deal for anybody that vapes or that's in that has friends and family and loved ones that vape, because that's between 2006 and between last year and 2016 is when a lot of growth happened. That 10-year gap is a big difference, because that's when a lot of the higher output and more satisfying vaping devices were invented and launched, but it's also when a lot of the newer tanks and flavors and things like that really became perfected and much more easily obtainable. So that's a big deal. And what they've done is they've got it written into the appropriations bill. Now, the problem is that the House and the Senate both have different appropriations bills that have been sort of approved, if you will, but they have to combine those into a way that is going to get everybody on board and get it passed through both the House and the Senate. So we need to reach out to your elected representatives in the House and in the Senate and let them know that this is something that you care about, because otherwise, if they don't hear from us as vapors, then they're not going to think it's that important, and they're going to use that as a bargaining chip to be able to get rid of that to get something else that they want. So we need to start reaching out again to our elected officials and let them know that this is something that we're passionate about, and this is something they need to fight for. Otherwise, it's just going to get swept by the wayside, and we're going to be right back to square one, which nobody really wants. So that's your advocacy update. It's a little short and sweet, but it's very kind of condensed to the point this time, because this is something that's really important for every vapor out there. So try and make time to do that. You know, a lot of people are trying to do it every day. At least do it, once a week, and let your elected representatives know that this is something that you're passionate about. So that's for our advocacy update. And to do that, you can go to SaveVapor.org, which is the smoke, or the VTA, which is partnered with the Virginia Smoke-Free Association. SaveVapor.org is their website, and that they have a little form box in the top I guess for you guys, it would be the top right-hand side, where you can type in your zip code and your address, and it'll give you a list of all your elected representatives. You can email them, you can call them, you can fax them. I recommend doing all three. I try to do at least one of those every week. But if you could do it every day, that's even better, because we want to make sure that our voices as vapors are heard. The CASA website, I believe, has a similar plugin or window, if you will, so that you can get in touch with your elected representatives through them, as well as I'm sure Mr. Connolly has a plugin on his website that allows you to do it somewhere, or if you go to the American Vaping Association website, I'm sure there's a link somewhere to get to it, and Safada's involved in that as well. So definitely keep that in the back of your mind during this holiday season, so that we don't get a big lump of coal in our stockings as vapors, and get that kind of squashed out, which would be very, very bad for all of us. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the Ask-A-Vaper show, we have switched over to YouTube now. It's a little bit more stable. I've got a little bit better control over the graphics, and hopefully you'll be able to get better resolution this way, because they have a lot more servers and whatnot. But it's also given us the live chat feature, so that I can do it in real time. So we've got a chat section on the page here. If you're watching, definitely pop a question or a comment or anything you've got in that chat section, because that's the whole purpose of this show. We want to educate you guys, get any of the questions that you have about certain things answered, because the premise of this altogether was that people were coming in and asking us questions about such and such at this vape shop told them that they could do this and put your battery in backwards and your mod's safer, and a lot of stuff like that's just not smart. And unfortunately, not everybody's super educated or knows what they're talking about. And our goal here is to just try to get the best possible information out there for everybody that wants it. So at the end of the day, that's our main mission statement, if you will. And that's the reason that we want to do it with a live chat. And using this YouTube platform is really going to help us hopefully kick that up a little bit, so that we can get more information out there to more people. So feel free to drop a question, and we'll try to get it answered during the show. If not, I'll follow up with you after in the next day or two if it's something I don't know the answer to, because I'm not going to claim to know the answer to everything. I'm kind of smart, but I know I don't know everything. So that being said, that's our advocacy update for December. Now this year, or this show, is going to be a little bit of a catch-up, to kind of give you a follow-up to some of the stuff we did in November, but it's also a little bit of a wrap-up and a look forward, if you will, into next year, and some of the trends that I think are going to be good. Some of the stuff that I've talked to other people about, that have said that works really well, and that they're seeing a lot more potential in than maybe some of the older stuff, because there's some exciting stuff going on. But if we don't get that predicate date changed, then a lot of this exciting stuff is never going to make it, or will only be available for a very limited time until it gets taken off the market by the FDA. So that's why we always start with advocacy, because at the end of the day, if we're not fighting for our rights as vapors, all of this is going to go away, and I don't think anybody wants that. Oh, sorry, I'm still getting over that schmutz. Don't get mad at me. I'm not trying to cough in your ear or anything, but this time of year, everybody got a little something going on. So what we're going to do now is the segment called Common Misconceptions. Okay, so what we're talking about today is the common misconception that lower resistance means it's going to vape better. Now, that's not necessarily wrong, but there's a lot more that goes into it than just the resistance, so to speak. A lot of these manufacturers are pushing these tanks like the TFV12s and your, King, Cloud, Monster, Chucker, Beast, Prince, Typhoon tank, or whatever the hell you want to call it. And they're pushing these super, super low resistance, 1.1, 1.0. I think there's even one of the graphics has got, yeah, that TFV12 right there is a 0.10 coil. Over here on the left-hand side of your screen. And you know, there's a couple of different things that go into this, and that's kind of what I want to point out, because we have a lot of people that come in that their buddy told them to get this coil and that and the other, but they end up buying it and it either burns out too fast or it doesn't perform the way they want because they're not necessarily vaping the same way as their buddy or their girlfriend or boyfriend, whatever the case may be. So we just want to again try to help educate a little bit and let you know the factors that are involved with vapor production, especially when it comes to some of these newer, you know, sub-ohm or what some people are calling super sub-ohm tanks, so that you can find the best, you know, setup for the performance you're looking for. So this graphic I threw together real quick, basically just to show you that there's three major components, the way I see it, to how much vapor or flavor or whatnot you're going to get out of your tank or your device, right? So the first one is airflow. And airflow is a very often overlooked component, not from the aspect necessarily as a whole, but when you're talking about these pre-made coils specifically, just because you have more coils doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get more vapor, because what happens is they have to make those coils smaller diameter wise, so you're actually losing airflow even though you've got more holes for it to go through. I don't know if that makes sense. If it doesn't, please throw a comment up there so that I can figure out a way to reword it, or, you know, drop back down to the video and show it to you real quick. But it's kind of like if you took, you know, if you took a garden hose and then shoved a bunch of straws in a circle in the garden hose, you're essentially going to end up with one of these like TF V12 T14s or V12 T12s, where you've taken one giant circle and segmented it into, you know, 12 or 6 or 5 smaller circles. It's not necessarily going to give you more flow of liquid. It's just segmenting it so that you're dividing it into smaller sections, right? So the main reason I threw this together is because I wanted to show you guys, like, if you look at the top row, you've got the V12 T14 and the V12 T12. Now, if you look at those, the rating on these guys is ridiculously high. It's like 80 to 350 on the V12 T14, and then pretty much the same, like 60 to 350 on the V12 T12. Most people would assume because those go up the highest and they have the lowest resistance, those are going to create the most vapor. But the problem with a lot of these, you know, 10, 12, 14, 16, you've got in the V12 T12, you've got 6 holes essentially, and they're parallel coils. So there is technically 12 coils in there, but you really only have 6 holes. So to make all those coils fit in there, they have to shrink the diameter. Now, this drops the resistance because you've got so much wire in there to get your 12 coils in it that you're able to push it higher wattage. What a lot of people don't realize is when you break it down to voltage, which is the true measure of how much power is getting to these coils, the voltage on a point, what is that, 0.12? So let's say I'm running this 0.12 coil at, where do they say it's best? Best at 120 to 200. So let's start at 120 at 0.12. You're only running 3.7 volts. 3.7 volts is what I would consider like a median or baseline of power. That's your average power setting for most of these coils that it's able to handle. So a 120 watts on this V12 T12 coil is essentially giving you the same amount of power as, you know, 50 watts on a 0.4 Cleto coil. The biggest difference is the amp load, and the amp load is 31.62. So what that means is that it's pulling harder, it's sucking harder on the batteries at that lower 0.12 resistance, but you're still pushing the same power from the batteries through the chip to the coil as you would be at like 45 or 50 on a 0.4 Cleto coil. But you're going to get probably twice as much battery life out of running 50 watts on a 0.4 Cleto coil as you would running 120 watts on this 0.12 TFV12 T12 coil. I know that sounds super confusing, but when you break it down to the actual practical application, essentially what that means is you're going to get roughly the same amount of vapor either way, but you're going to get much more battery life out of the higher resistance 0.4 Cleto coil than you would out of the lower resistance T12 coil. Now, if you look down underneath that row at the bottom two, the V12X4 and the V12Q4. Now, these are probably what I would consider the best two airflow types of coil for the V12. And the reason for that is you've got less coils. It's slightly higher in resistance. I think they're both 0.15. But you'll notice that the ratings on them are lower because of the resistance difference. So let's take for a minute, let's take that Q4. That Q4 is probably the most airy out of any of the TFV12 coils. So if you want a really airy draw and are looking for a lot of vapor production, that's probably going to be the best coil for you because it's basically wide open. You know what I mean? So that one, the recommended is, let's say 55? Damn it, it's too small. Let me blow this up a little bit. Bear with me a second, guys. I'm getting old. I'm going to blow this graphic up some. Come on, baby. There it goes. 90 to 160. Okay, so that's their recommended best performance on this coil is 90 to 160. So let's do that same math we just did for 0.15. Excuse me. At 90 watts. 3.67 volts. So you're just slightly under on the voltage, but the amps drop by 5 and some change, which means it's not going to be working quite as hard on your batteries in order to deliver that same bottom of the barrel best recommended vapor production. So you're going to get probably 10% better battery life out of it, but the main thing you're going to notice is it's going to draw a lot smoother because there's not as much inside the coil blocking and dividing up the airflow. So in order to for it to be able to draw smoother like that, you're going to have to pull a little bit harder, which means, or because it draws smoother, you're going to pull a little bit harder, which means you're going to get better vapor production out of it, in theory. So that's the airflow piece of this that we're talking about, right? Power-wise, it's roughly the same metric, but because of the resistance of the coil and the difference in airflow, that's why you're seeing you know, people that really like big clouds and warm vapes tend to go with the X4s and the Q4s because it's got more airflow through the coil. Whereas the T14s and the T12s, you need higher wattage ramped up in order to get that coil to produce any nominal amount of vapor that's going to satisfy you. Now, let's scooch over a smidge here and talk about the next piece of this. So the next piece of this is surface area. Now, some people that I've talked to would argue this is the most important piece of this whole deal. The surface area is how much coil you've got actually touching cotton, okay? And that's where your T12s and your T14s, most people would assume have the edge. However, because of the reduced airflow that you've got going on there, it's not necessarily a easy thing to figure out because you need all three of these pieces in order for the coil to produce the maximum amount of vapor it's designed to produce. So you've got your airflow. This particular coil I picked out was the Crown 3 because to me this is kind of like the gold standard of flavor right now, along with the Cleto, you know, and they're very similar design coils. You've got parallel coils run down a fairly large diameter single barrel, but because the coil's taller, you've got more surface area going on, which is why I think you get much better flavor out of these two specific tanks than anything else that I've tried to date. Now, we're going to talk about something a little bit later with mesh that may kind of change the whole discussion about this, but the way it stands right now, excuse me, this is what I see as to the best surface area you're going to get out of a pre-made coil without sacrificing airflow. Now, the last piece of this is the wicking. Now, from a production of vapor standpoint, some people would argue that the less wicking, the faster you're going to be able to get the juice to the coil, which means it's going to perform best. And in a perfect world, I would probably agree with that. However, um, you also have to have enough wicking so that your coil lasts more than, a day or two, which is the biggest problem that people are talking about with these baby beast coils that I've got pictured here. Um, and the design or the design idea, from what I can gather about these baby beast coils, is because they're so small and short, they wanted to maximize performance, but they have to sacrifice longevity to do that. And that's why most people are getting, from what I can see, anywhere from 3 to 7 days, 7 maybe being a stretch, 3 to 5 days probably more accurate, lifespan out of these coils. However, those 3 to 5 days are phenomenal. The trick is you can't let the cotton become exposed to the air, because the coil's touching the cotton all the way top and bottom, as you can see in the top shot pictures below, um, where it says Q2, X4, and T8, not the ones that are side profile, but the ones right under that. You can see that those coils take up every bit of real estate inside there. Um, so because of that, they're not allowed to, they're not able to put as much wick inside these coils, and that's going to give you the lack of longevity that we were talking about. But part of the reason that these coils are so popular is because they do give really good flavor for those 3 to 5 days. And from what I can figure, part of the reason they give such good flavor is because if you look at the size of those wicking holes in comparison to the size of the actual coil, it's pretty much top to bottom. Like the T8's a little bit different, for obvious reasons, but the X4 and the Q2, there's not a whole lot above or below that coil that you don't have wicking sticking out. So relative to the T12s and the Cletos and your Crown 3s that you've got in the middle here, um, from a percentage of the sides, these baby beasts have probably got some of the biggest wicking holes that are available. The problem is that they've got the resistance on these coils so low that it doesn't give you as much wiggle room to play with as far as wattage goes. It wants you to push higher power so that you can get better performance out of the coil, but it's also going to burn it out faster because they can't fit as much cotton down inside these chambers where the coils can touch. So essentially, they're trying to maximize the surface area and the wicking, but they only have so much airflow to work with because of the size of the coil. But that's really what it boils down to from where I'm sitting, with all the different tests that I've done and different ways that I've tried to work these coils out to get the best possible results, whether it's longevity or flavor or vapor production. But again, looking at the Baby Beast coils on the bottom, the Q2 is probably going to be your best for vapor production because it's got a huge center coil. But a lot of people that I've talked to that tried those Q2s didn't like the fact that they burned out very quickly, because there's two versions. This is the .04, which is the original one, and now they've got a .2 or .25 version out, and that's basically just a thinner or a thicker gauge of wire with the same housing. But because of how big the diameter of the coil is, there's very little cotton around the edge, and that's why they burn out so fast. Relative to the X4, which is probably the one I liked the best, it's kind of the best of both worlds. You've got fairly large coil diameters for the size of what they've got to work with, but you can see there's probably twice as much cotton down in there as there is in the Q2. But when you get to the T8, you're seeing much smaller coil diameters, and because it's only wicking from the outside, a lot of people have problems with dry hits on those, because if you're chain vaping it, especially at this 760 to 80 watt mark, you may not be pushing a lot of power to it, but because it's such low resistance, it heats up quick, and if there's not juice on that cotton, it's going to burn it out instantly. And that's the biggest problem people have with these Baby Beast coils. They don't pay attention, and they vape it at an angle, or the tank's half empty and they tilt it, or in bed or on the couch, and it's not straight up and down, and half of that coil is dry when they go to hit it, and then the whole thing's burnt. So that's what I want to do for you guys for the common misconception segment, if you will. I know it's a lot of information and I kind of rambled a little bit there, but that's the gist of it. And we try to explain this to customers when they come in every day and they don't like this coil, but they like this coil because this one lasts longer, but the other one's got better flavor. So it's kind of, we're getting to that point where the technology is becoming so advanced and it's got so much R&D behind it that they're really designing them for a specific purpose. So if you want more vapor production, but you also want it to last longer, then you really have to decide which one's more important, because you can't really have both. You can't have great vapor production and great flavor and a really long lasting coil, because at the end of the day, they're not trying to make a coil that's going to last you a month. They're trying to make a coil that you're really, really going to like for 3 to 7 days, and then you got to buy another one, because that's where they make their money, is selling coils. Um, that's why personally I prefer rebuildable tanks, because then I can rewick it as much as I want, and it just takes a little bit of time and patience, but after I get used to it, then it's not really that big a deal, and I can get the perfect amount of flavor that I want every single time, which is a nice segue into our next section of the show. So that's just the common misconception that I wanted to touch on this month, and just give you guys a little bit of information about, you know, some of the stuff that we've picked up on talking to customers, doing a little bit of research. And the next part of this we're going to go into is a new segment that we want to do. It's basically a, you know, we give you every month I'll try to give you like a first look or a first impression, if you will, of some of the new stuff that a lot of times just came in like last week or today, and I haven't really had a ton of time to put into it to really give you a fair, full rundown of all the highs and lows and things that we like, things that we didn't like about it. But this time I brought back two that we talked about last month, so that we can do a little more of an in-depth, you know, discussion about it, if you will, as opposed to just a first impression. So, first one we're going to go over is the Joytech Dolphin. Now, this is going to be a, I guess, revised version, if you will, of the excuse me, of the Penguin kit. Now, the Penguin kit was super popular, but there were a couple of little, I would say, little larger than nitpicky things about it that they took it upon themselves to rectify rather quickly, which I was impressed with. And they actually sent us a sample of one of these guys a couple weeks ago, so I've had a good 2 or 3 weeks to play with this and really give it the thorough overlook. But the other thing they did that I want to touch on is they redesigned one of the coils. So a lot of people were having issues with the 0.6 coils, either giving them dry hits or burning out within like a day or two. So what they did was they took that 0.6 and scrapped it and came back with a 1.2, which is definitely a lot more of mouth to lung style than the original 0.6s were. They still have the 0.25s, which a lot of people really love, but they took the 0.6 and revamped it. The main thing they did that was different is if you look at this rendering here, it's got a big puck covering one of the sides, and it used to be straight through there. But that puck is restricting the airflow, I would say a good 80, maybe even 90%. So you're going to get a much more true mouth to lung type of experience with this than you did with the 0.6 that it originally came with. So just to give you a side-by-side comparison here of what I'm talking about, you can see the standard, you know, original. This is the 0.25 coil, and you can see on that side it's got a fairly large juice flow, or I mean airflow, going through the center of it, and then obviously your juice flow through the top section there. That's that JVIC vertical wicking that they have, and then here's your 0.12. Now you can see obviously the coil diameter itself is smaller, but even on the 0.6 they found that because of the amount of cotton that was in there and the airflow that you're getting, people are just hitting it too damn hard, and that's what's causing a lot of the dry hits. So they put that puck there that's just got that tiny little hole right in the top, and that restricted the airflow enough to really be able to utilize this as a true mouth to lung style vape versus your, you know, more airy, wide open 0.25. So that's a really nice adaptation, I guess you could call it, of the, you know, JVIC coils. A couple other things I want to point out to you here. The airflow on this bad boy, you can see it's got 2 airflow channels, and each one of these channels is a little bit deeper this way, I guess larger, and slightly wider, maybe the same width, but there's 2 of them, and they're larger top to bottom. So you're basically getting, you know, an extra 50% worth of airflow on this bad boy. The other main difference that I noticed about this, obviously, is the pod itself. The pod is a little bit smaller. They dropped it from 0.8 down to 0.6 milliliters, but they added something that I thought was genius, and it's this little flappy grommet for your fill hole. So now you don't have to flip it all the way and pop the coil out to fill it up and hope that it doesn't spill out through the top. You just fill it up through that little porthole there. I started calling it a blowhole today just because it's a dolphin, so I thought it was funny, but you don't have to laugh at my dad joke. It's not that funny. But there's your little fill hole there, and I've found if you just hold it like this, straight up and down, and fill it that way, it works the best, so that you can fill the entire chamber up to the top with e-liquid and really get the maximum 6 mils out of this guy. So that's the newest features or additions, I guess you would say. Now the packaging says this is a 2100 milliamp hour, whereas the original one was 2000. But it's a little bit smaller of a form factor, so maybe shrinking the tank a little bit was part of the reason that they did that, so they could fit a little bit bigger battery life in there. But you know, I've still been able to get almost 3/4 to a full day, depending on how often I use it. But I like to run it with the 0.2 coil because I find with the lower nicotine stuff, it just works better. I have been experimenting a little bit with nic salts recently. Not enough to give you like a rundown on that yet, but the higher mouth to lung style definitely does work well with the nic salts for sure. So something that I'm going to keep working at and try to give you guys a little more information in January about that. But so far it's working out. I could see a piece of the market that really could get down with the nic salts and enjoy that. Excuse me. I just don't know how the price points and everything are going to shake out because it is more expensive than the regular liquid nicotine based e-liquids, but people that don't want large amounts of vapor and just want to hit it and get a small puff, kind of like you would get off of, you know, a cigarette or a cigarello or something like that, I could definitely see a need for it in the marketplace. So now the next piece of gear we're going to talk about is something that I've really been enjoying. Excuse me. We did touch on this guy last month, and since then I've been using it fairly regularly. Like I said, I did have the schmutz for a couple days, so can't say I've been using it every day, but you know, it is this guy, the Vandy Vapes Triple 28 RTA. Shout out to Twisted 420 for designing this. He's quite a character. I had the opportunity to meet him a couple years ago in Charlotte, and he's a really cool dude. Definitely one of my favorite vape personalities, if you will, designed products. And, you know, a lot of people went out and bought the Kylan, and I'm still a big fan of the Kylan, but I do know that a lot of people had issues with the press fit around the bottom section where the deck is, with some leakage going on. But I'll be the first to admit, you know, this product, they definitely went back and really did the proper amount of QC so that I haven't had a single issue with this tank since I've had it. And I've been running it almost for 3 to 4 weeks strong now. Obviously, I'm sure most of you guys have seen the unboxing. You get your spare glass, you get an Ultim drip tip, you get your little O-ring bag, 510 adapter, some spare grub screws, your little T-tool, and then there's a manual and all that good stuff in the bottom too. But, you know, this isn't an unboxing. This is just a... so here it is. You know, it's a 28 millimeter tank, obviously, so it's pretty big. It's not going to fit on everything, but I do like the fact that it's wider but shorter. Holds 5 ml of juice, which I'm a big fan of, and I've got it with 3 coils in it. I tried it with 2 4.5 millimeter coils, and it worked well, but I still felt like there was a little too much airflow going on. So I went back and decided, well, it's called the Triple 28 for a reason. They've got 3, you know, sets of post holes so that you can put 3 coils in there. So why not try it that way, right? So let me see if I can break this bad boy open for you guys real quick. Show you what I got going on here. It's nothing super fancy. You know, I don't like an extremely warm vape per se, but you know, I gotta admit, I assumed this was gonna be for, you know, your cloud chasers, your vape chuckers, your people that like to run 120 and above, just based on the overall, you know, look and design elements of it. But I have to say that I've been really digging the flavor off of this thing, and we'll talk about that in a second too. So this cotton has not been changed in like a week, so go ahead and, you know, make fun of me and give me crap if you want to, but get that O-ring back down there. So there's the build that I've got on it. I don't know if you can see that real well. It's 3 hybrid Clapton coils. So you've got, I believe it's 26 Canthal with 32 or 34 nichrome around the outside to really kind of make the flavor pop. But they're all right at 3 millimeters. And you can see there's a little bit of gap in between each one to really give you 360 degrees of airflow around each coil. And I don't know if some of you guys can notice this, but I actually made a boo-boo. The 2 outsides are 7 wraps. The center one is 6 wraps. So I accidentally turned this into a stage build. So the center one's going to heat up just a little bit faster than the outside ones are. But I haven't had a single issue with it. But what I wanted to show you, I don't know if you can really see it. Yeah. You see how that's completely concave, smooth, domed over? That little piece right there, I think is probably the smartest design element of this tank. And the reason I say that is because I've had a couple of tanks and drippers that have had that same domed style as opposed to having, you know, a sharp angle on it. And they've all been known as producing, you know, really, really good flavor. And I don't know if it's just like an airflow or resistance thing as far as when you pull it, or if it just allows the vapor to kind of circle on itself, so you're losing a little bit of it. But that one little, you know, fully smooth dome piece in the chimney, I think really makes this tank stand head and shoulders above a lot of other rebuildable tanks that I've tried. You know, for the price, the amount of juice that it holds, and just the overall build quality and performance of it, this is probably one of my favorite tanks that I've ever used. And I didn't think I was going to say that. I thought I would like it, but I didn't think I was going to get this amount of flavor out of it. And that's what really shocked me. You can see it's putting out fairly good vapor, but if you look at my power settings, 4.12 volts at 77.5 watts. Nothing crazy. I'm not one of these 100 plus 200 watt junkies. I'm more about flavor than anything. Obviously, having a third coil is going to drop the resistance a little bit lower, so it's a 0.22. If I added that last wrap like I was supposed to, it would probably be closer to a 0.25, 0.27. Which just means I'd be running at about 65 instead of 77. But the flavor is absolutely tremendous. And I have to say, I think a lot of that contributes to the larger size of the deck, being a 28 instead of a 25. So that means you can have a larger chimney but I think that that domed inside chimney piece is really a big part of why this thing is such an amazing tank. So that's my kind of long-term review, if you will, of these couple of guys that we touched on last week, or last month rather. Now it doesn't look like I've got a whole bunch of questions going on, so got a little bit of time left. What I want to jump into now is our topic for the wrap-up portion of this. Now, I've looked a lot into this mesh stuff, right? And I've actually got a mesh tank here that I was going to throw a build on for you and kind of show you how it all works, but I spent too much time yakking, so maybe I'll just do a separate review video on that we'll have up in the next week or two. But I was hoping to have this Mesh Pro RDA in stock already so that I could show it to you and throw a build on it, but it's not going to be here till Thursday or something. So I just want to show you a couple of features that we got going on with this guy. Now, this is the second wave of mesh RDAs, if you will, that's coming out. We all know Vandy Vapes had the mesh, the first one, and then either Digiflavor or Geek Vape had one that came out. Now, this one is a little bit different. They've added a couple of nice features here. You still got those big, large, channels, if you will, to drop your coils down in. And as you can see on the bottom, you can run regular coils on there. I think the way you'd have to do the wicks would be a little bit weird, but whatever. But if you look at the bottom middle where they've got that mesh thrown in there, that plate across the middle, I think is a huge improvement over what we've seen so far. And the reason for that is because all the mesh stuff that I've messed with, you have to have the mesh pretty dense in there so that you're getting the full surface area from that mesh coil. That mesh coil heats up really fast and it holds heat, or it has a lot of heat to it. So if you don't have the wick firm up against that mesh, then you're going to get some dry hits. And that's the #1 complaint people have had over the mesh from Vandy Vape and some of the other stuff. And I think it's because the way that the deck was designed, that you basically just have your flat deck with the slits in it, where you got to drop the mesh down in there and just pack a crap load of cotton in there in order to get that nice flush fit that you're looking for. So with this, what they've done is they've raised that deck up a little bit off of the bottom floor and given you that center plate so that you can rest or use your cotton, that plate as a backstop for your cotton. So you don't have to use nearly as much cotton, and it also raises it up so that you can get the full circulation underneath and get the maximum amount of vapor going straight through the drip tip. The other thing that I want to point out for all you bottom feeder or squonk fans is by raising that post up, it allowed you to put a protruding squonk pin in there. And you can kind of see it on the inset over here on the right side. That little tube that's sticking up is your squonk pin. And what that does is it allows you to squonk it and allows the juice to pool in the actual base of the deck, so that you're not squonking it every 3 or 4 hits. You can actually squeeze and get the juice to shoot up the tube, and then it'll rest in the base of the deck there so that it's not squirting back down into the bottle. It may not sound like a big deal. It may not sound like something that you want. Granted, if you do that and tip the RDA left or right more than about 45 degrees, it could cause you some leakage problems, but it's got a deep enough well in there that I believe that's going to be a huge benefit for anybody that's been running a bottom feeder that's had some leaking issues, or has been having dry hit issues, or having to re-squeeze the bottle every 2 or 3 hits. That little extension of that bottom pin right there, I think is going to make a huge difference. And I'm going to have some later this week to be able to play with, and I can let you know for sure in an upcoming review video. Excuse me. So that brings us to our final piece of the show. And what we're talking about is mesh, just in general at this point, because I'm seeing a lot of new mesh products and a lot of people asking about mesh. So I went and did a little research to try to see what's out there right now and what is coming out in the next couple of weeks that I can see so far. So let me break out my little mesh RTA here for you that I was kind of learning on and teaching myself. And then I can share the little bit of information I do have with you currently. So obviously, I'm sure you guys have seen this by now, the mesh RTA from our buddies at Vandy Vape. Very well made tank again. A lot of people on the fence with this guy are not really sure if they want to get one. I've seen a couple of reviews where people are complaining about the airflow. Now, right up front, I'm just going to tell you, anything that you ever see that has top airflow like that, where the airflow is above the coil, is never designed to make massive amounts of vapor. It's just physics. You've got to bring the air through these holes, down, and then back up again. There's so much drag going on there that you're never going to have huge amounts of vapor coming out on it. So if that's what you're looking for, this is not for you. That being said, this has another, completely domed chimney to it. They added the nice, slide fill feature, which I very much enjoy over the swing style doors that some of the other tank manufacturers have been using. And it comes with this bubble glass that gets you like 4 or 5 mils. As opposed to the 2 with the straight tube glass. So now here's what we're mainly talking about here. And this is your little mesh strips, okay? This is 300 mesh, and that's basically how dense the metal is or crossed. It's basically a woven metal. So the higher the number, the denser amount of metal you have per square millimeter or inch or however they measure it. But that's how it breaks down. So you get, a 4.0 or a 400 mesh and a 350 or 300 mesh. And if you look, the resistance is a little bit different. The 300 is going to be a little bit lower, and the 400, because it's got more crosses to it, it's going to have a little bit more resistance per foot. Now, both of these are 316L. There is Kanthal, Ni80 nichrome, and I want to say I even saw some sort of hybrid like Nephi or titanium, something specifically for temperature control. That's yet to be tested by anybody that I've ever talked to, so we're not really going to focus on that as much as just the 316L is the primary mesh that's out there in the marketplace right now. Now, this deck may look a little weird to most people, but it's actually fairly simple to build. The first thing that you want to do before you do anything else is go ahead and throw some cotton in there, right? So we're going to take a big chunk of cotton and drop it down in there, okay? Then we're going to open up these posts here and here and fish the mesh through each side around there. The less mesh you use, just like with coils, the lower the resistance is going to be. So the more cotton you can fit in there and wrap the mesh around it to kind of bail it, if you will, or hold it in, the higher the resistance is going to be. Now, the key with this is 2 things. The first one is, you see those little holes down there where your juice flow is? All of those have to be covered. If those are not covered, this thing is going to be a straw. It's not going to be a vape. You're just going to drink that juice right up. So when you push it in there, you want to kind of pick or flare out the bottom, if you will, so that all those holes are completely covered. That way the juice is going to the cotton and not just coming up the sidewall when you toot on it. The second piece of this is because in the renderings and the pictures and stuff, this mesh is about twice as thick as it actually is when you get it. Now, it's yet to be seen if you can double band it with the way these screws are positioned. I'm sure it's possible. Whether or not you want to do it is another story completely. But because you've got the thinner mesh strips to go here, once you get the mesh attached around the cotton, you want to kind of stuff it down in there a little bit, because that does 2 things for you. It puts more tension on this band so you get that complete surface area and tight pack like we were talking about earlier, but it also helps the bottom kind of make a good seal, if you will, so that you're not going to get that straw effect or, you know, flooding as it's commonly known. Um, so those are the two tips I've got for anybody that wants to use, you know, this mesh or any other mesh device. Make sure that the cotton is packed really well where the metal mesh and the cotton meet. You want that to be fairly dense. But with this one in particular, you want to flare out the bottom so that all those bottom juice flow holes are covered. And you'll notice there's none behind the posts here, so you don't have to worry about that side. But with the, you know, other 270 degrees or whatever the math works out to, that's where you want to make sure those holes are completely covered and there's nowhere for the juice to go except into the cotton. Okay. I did want to build this up for you and give you a little bit better demo, but I'm running out of time tonight, so maybe I'll have time to do it in a video later, but I'm sure there's a couple of videos already out there on how to do it. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me. But that's the Mesh RTA from Vandy Vapes. If you do those couple of things, then and you want a flavor tank that's not going to produce huge amounts of vapor, it's satisfying to me. But again, I'm not a cloud chucker. But at the end of the day, it's a really, really good flavor. And that's what excites me the most about this mesh phenomenon. So I'm sure we've talked about, you know, the original Vandy Mesh RTA or RDA. We've talked about the Geek Vape RDA Mesh Pro that we're getting in this week. We've talked about the Mesh RTA that we have right now. Now the next thing, and I'm just going to drop this in there because we don't have a whole lot of time yet, but the only other thing that I wanted to tell you is that there's now a mesh sub-ohm tank. Now it's from Freemax, okay? And my understanding is that it's going to be landing this week in the United States. So you're going to start seeing it popping up left and right. I promise you that I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure we get them here before anybody else gets them in this area, let alone the state. Because I think this thing is going to be the next big thing. It's got a lot of things going for it. You know, the Fire Luke already has a really good reputation for flavor. I personally have never messed with a lot of Freemax stuff, simply for the fact that we sell a lot of Aspire stuff and we believe in their quality. They make good stuff, and the Freemax tanks have always kind of been a second party Aspire, if you will. That being said, from everyone I've talked to, they did a good job with the Fire Luke tank. And now they've got this mesh coil version of it coming out. It's a completely separate tank, takes completely separate coils. But I'm trying to find a picture to throw up here for you guys of one of the coils. Here's the shit. Where did I put this? Here we go. Yes. Oh no. So here's a picture of the tank itself. No, that's not right. And like I said, I've looked a bunch of places to try to order this thing just to be able to get one for the show tonight, and I haven't been able to find them in stock anywhere. So that being said, I'm just going to drop a picture up here and let you guys drool over it so that when we do get them in stock, you can come check it out and we can talk about it. Because I think this thing is going to be the next great sub-ohm tank that's coming out. Let me see if I can do this real quick on the fly. Bam. Hey, look at that. I did it, and we still got time left on the show. Beautiful. So there you go. It's got an interesting kind of design to it. They took the little mesh thing and went a little hardcore on the actual aesthetic pieces of the tank itself. But it's not the worst thing in the world. I've seen a lot uglier ones. So, you know, you've got the little mesh grippies, I guess you would call it. They give it a nice aesthetic. You know, the stainless steel one to me looks a little cheap personally, but that's personal preference. They do have the gunmetal, the black, the gold, the rainbow, and of course my favorite, the blue. Um, but it's a 24 millimeter. It's made out of 316 stainless. It's got 3 mil capacity, so decent but not crazy. And the mesh coil. Now, like I said, I was trying to find a picture of the actual coil itself. Um, in this quick, short span of time, I was not successful. However, when I get some in my hand, I will definitely throw a couple up on, our social media, Instagram, Facebook, so that you can really see what it's got going on. But the couple people that I've talked to that have actually gotten one of these in their hand and played with it a little bit were very impressed with it. And I got to admit, I've heard more good things than bad things about Freemax. We've just never really had the need to stock any of their products because of the Aspire Freemax kind of back and forth, if you will. But this one really looks interesting. So once I get a confirmation that one of our distributors has got them, I will definitely let you know what the ETA expected arrival date is on these bad boys. And of course, once I get it in, I'll drop a short little first impressions video for you, either on our Instagram or Facebook, and try to link it to YouTube. But I'm still learning a little bit of the quick video stuff, editing for the YouTube. So bear with me. But like I said, the mesh is, I think, going to be the next big thing in vaping. Maximizing your surface area. You've got your nichrome, your kanthal, and your stainless steel, so your flavor options are ridiculous. The one thing that really is a drawback, in my opinion, is the resistance of a lot of these coils. I think they're advertising this coil at, where'd it go? Damn it, I just read it. I want to say 0.12 is what I read. I can't quite seem to find that again. 0.15, there it is. New mesh coil, 0.15, 40 to 90 watts. So it can handle a little bit of power for a small, 3 mil tank. I think 90 watts is plenty, especially since this is going to be fairly flavorful as well. So there you go. That's a look into the future, if you will. I do want to take this opportunity to wish everybody a happy holiday from all of us here at RVA Vapes. Whether you celebrate, whatever holiday that you celebrate, I just hope that, we wish the best for all your family and loved ones, and hopefully you enjoy a lot of good time with them and make some good memories. Want to thank all of our fans and friends for, supporting us over the last 4 years. It's been, amazing to meet all you cool people and talk vape stuff with you, talk life stuff with you, whatever. We really appreciate each and every one of you guys. So we want to wish you happy holidays from everybody here at RVA Vapes. And the last thing I'm going to say, please subscribe to our channel. We're getting ready to relaunch it. We're going to have a whole bunch of fresh content. Click the little subscribe button somewhere around here. I'll figure it out eventually. There's a little bell now too. If you click that little bell, you'll get a little notification in your email when we do upload our videos so that you can check it out. Our upload schedule is going to be every Saturday, new content. It may be one video, it may be 5 videos. It really just depends on how fast I can teach myself all the editing stuff. And I do happen to be married to a video editor. Shout out to the wifey. Love you, boo. Pretty in Ink Productions for all your videography needs. She doesn't have time to do my piddly little videos, so I'm just going to pick her brain, get a little feedback, and try to do my best with it. But, we love you guys. Thank you for tuning in. This has been Ask-A-Vaper, your December final episode of 2017. If you want to smoke, that's your business. If you want to quit, we can help. Maybe. Legally, I can't. But if you want to quit, come talk to us. We might have something to help you out. Thank you all. Happy holidays. Peace.